Well, how was I supposed to know that it was a dry campus? It wasn't my fault. I shouldn't be in trouble for that.
Oh, David.
What? Well, it wasn't my fault.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Hoops HD.
Okay. Wasn't my fault.
This is the Hoops HD report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by David Griggs over there, who has been drinking in places he should not be drinking. Got John Sleek on the other side. Down below, John Titel, Matt Sikowski, and Joey Fortson. Full panel here this evening. This is the Hoops HD report, where we discuss all the news and notes of what's going on in the college basketball world, run through the major conferences, look at the games that have happened and the games that are upcoming, and discuss anything else. But before we get to the games that actually happened, on Saturday early afternoon, the NCAA Tournament Committee announced their top 16 teams as of right then. I can't say it's as of right now because we've had 2 days of games since then. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up on the screen here just to show you who their top 16 seeds are. And I want to run through each of you here and just kind of get your thoughts on whether this was a good thing or a bad thing to do, and what your actual thoughts on the NCAA's announcements are. The big point being, I think, Gonzaga number 4 overall, which kind of surprised a lot of people. But John Titel, what were your thoughts about this announcement? Do you think this was useful or a waste?
It depends what purpose they're trying to serve. If it's to create interest in the tournament in the cold month of February, thumbs up, because people are talking about this like us. If it's to predict what the tourney committee, selection committee is going to say in a month from now, not sure. I mean, Baylor's number 3 on the list. I think they might be dropping a little bit this week.
And Joby, I thought that the most telling part was at the end of the show when Mark Hollis was asked how long this would last, and he crumpled up his paper and he threw it over his shoulders, and it's gone.
At least he's honest. I mean, I think it shows where the committee's looking. The shock to me was Wisconsin not being listed. You would think the outright leader of the Big Ten with the gaudy record, with solid wins. I was actually very surprised that Wisconsin was not even up to a 3 seed, I would argue, in my world. But it's exactly right. The staying power is only as good as the results that then follow. But I love seeing it for a couple of reasons. And the key is looking at what they value. You can make a value judgment of where they stood on that date and then measure it and say, okay, they do value this. Butler being a great example. Butler is going to create a lot of controversy. What do you value? They have some awful losses. They have some really great wins. They have good overall paper, a ridiculous amount of wins versus the top 100. But are they the most impressive team on the eye test? Paper won out here. Paper and quality wins won out here. Pay attention going forward. To paper and quality wins is a key component here.
Well, and Matt, you've been a big proponent of this Gonzaga team since before the season started even. Were you surprised that they were all the way down at 4 and not higher than that, being undefeated?
Yeah, I'm at least surprised they're below Baylor. I could see maybe the argument that they can value Nova and Kansas over them, but I'm a bit surprised with Baylor, and that was even before today's debacle in Lubbock.
Yeah, and David, you had a comment on them too?
On the overall thing,
Yes.
I mean, I thought it was great. It was a bracket on television. I loved it. I wish they would do it every week. Now, as you know, maybe our audience doesn't know, the committee does this as an exercise. They actually build an entire seed list just kind of as a checkpoint, and they release the top 16. Why not release the whole thing? Why not do what the football committee does and release one every week? Why not do what the women's committee does and release one every 2 weeks? I thought it was great in the sense, I agreed with what John Titel said. Is it an actual good predictor of what it's going to look like? No. Is it a bracket on television? Yes. I love brackets on television. We do them every week. Why can't they? But the other thing I took from this is that it's clear to me that I should be in charge of this.
I think what I took from it is that it's clear that David should not be in charge.
I suppose if David were in charge, we might have had SIU Edwardsville get in the top 16 by mistake.
No. They were eliminated from the survival board.
Well, Sleek, let me stick with you for a second. The other news that came out today actually has to do with the NIT, and we normally don't discuss NIT on this show, but it had to do with some experimental rules that the NIT is going to be using. Can you fill us in on what's going on?
Well, I think it's going to be not just for the NIT, but also for the CBI and the CIT. I mean, one of the things they're going to do is in the front court now, whenever they reset the shot clock, they're going to instead reset it from 30 seconds to 20 seconds in an effort to speed up the game and also get some more possessions. But one of the things that the puppet's already screaming about is at the 10-minute mark of each half, the fouls are going to reset back to 0. So if you get up to 5 fouls, you're going to be in the 2-shot bonus. So there won't be any 1-and-1 in these games. It'll just be 2 shots and then reset to 0 fouls at the 10-minute mark. So it's going to be like quarters, except without a stoppage in play at the 10-minute mark.
No. I got to. This is essentially what we are doing if we go to quarters. I mean, this is what we're doing if we go to quarters. It's just a disgrace. Those of you listening and not watching, you can't get the full effect of this. But trust me, it's not a good thing that's happening.
No, you can tell by the cackling of the panel here that it's not a good thing at all.
Yeah.
Well, let me get each of your thoughts on this. Tata, let me start with you. Do you agree with David that we are doing something to James Naismith's grave by going to quarters?
I'm going to need a minute to recover from that drawing. Good stuff. I certainly don't want quarters. I'm a big fan of ain't broke, don't fix. That being said, I'm fascinated to see what sort of strategy comes involved. Like if there's a few seconds left before we get to the 10 minutes period, you send out like your goon to like give somebody a forearm shiver because it's going to reset the fouls or something. I don't know.
Well, how about Matt? How about this other idea of the 20-second shot clock after I believe it's after things like a foul in the front court. You're inbounding the front court. Instead of going to a full 30, you only get 20 to kind of speed up the game.
Not a fan of it. I believe NBA has something in like that, and no, I am not a fan of that. I don't mind the quarters, but this, I feel like kind of artificially manipulates the game. And I and as someone who sees his team often lose defensive rebounds, there should be punishment for not getting the defensive rebound. You should have to go guard for another full shot clock.
Well, is it going to be after the defensive rebound as well? I know it was going to be after a foul.
There should be I thought it might have been if you don't get the defensive rebound too.
I'll check.
I think it's just after a foul, but after a rebound, I believe it does revert back to 30.
Okay, and I'll actually quote from the article today. It says a personal foul by the defense which results in no free throws, a technical foul of the defense, or the game is stopped for a bleeding player or blood on the uniform. And in each of those cases, it's inbound in the front court. So the defensive rebound sounds like it will go back to a 30-second.
Okay. Yeah, still.
What does it say about puppets rushing onto the floor?
That is not allowed either.
It didn't say that. I looked at the rules. It did not say that. It did not.
Because I know for one of these games, we're going to have a puppet rushing on the floor, rambling about going to quarters or tenths or eighths.
It's like, oh, look at how much time is left until the half is half over.
Joby, are you in favor of these rules potentially coming in next year, maybe even to quarters?
No.
I think let's start with the foul one. I don't think the foul or the reset to 20. I don't think it's going to have much effect. I'd be very honest. It's a big nothing burger in my world. Quarters, though, I am with Mr. Griggs on this. Quit trying to make college basketball the NBA. Once again, I'm calling you out, Jay Billis. The NBA stunk for a decade. Declining ratings. LeBron and the Golden State Warriors have saved it. Don't let the shiny object change what has been a solid, different, and enjoyable product in its own right. Do not. If you want to change things like freedom of movement and things like that, that's fine. But when you start messing with making the shot clock too low, when you start messing with the flow of the game and the strategy of the game, that's unique to college basketball. You're taking away that uniqueness and make it the NBA. If you make it the NBA, people are not going to watch college basketball because guess what? They're going to watch the NBA.
I think that's a great point. I think you nailed exactly my thoughts as well, Joby. Unfortunately, the other thing that we may see happen as well, this is not part of the experimental rules, but the half-court warping of the ball upon timeouts late in the game, which is also ridiculous. I don't know how calling a timeout gets you up to half court. I've never figured that one out in the NBA yet. It's like this.
They're not considering that, are they?
Well, not. Well, they put it in the women's game. They're
No,
not.
not this year.
They're not.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, because let's test the premise of that. In football, should you get to advance the ball 50 yards if you call timeout? No.
Well, if you're the team I'm rooting for, you should.
Okay.
Well, let's put it this way: in college, you're pretty much warping up to the 25 or 30-yard line anyhow at the beginning of overtime.
And I'll tell you, if you're Tom Brady and the Patriots in the fourth quarter or overtime in the Super Bowl, a timeout, you do warp to 50 yards because that's how quickly you move down the field. But that's another story also.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and pull up let's go to the actual some of the games that happened this week and forget about things that may or may not happen next year for the time being at least. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the standings here. This is our standings we've been using for the last few weeks. I've got the Big Ten up here, various different metrics, including the KPI, the ESPN strength of record, our colleague Joby's nitty gritty readings, KenPom ratings, ESPN's BPI, Sagarin ratings, a bunch of the other offensive and defensive ratings down here, your AP and coaches poll ratings, and all the information you need about teams is on this board. And I've got the Big Ten up because, David, we want to discuss what specific team in the Big Ten that we've almost been negligent in not really discussing these podcasts the last few weeks, and that's Northwestern, who got an amazing win on Sunday.
It was. I think it's the biggest win in the program's history. I know that they've beaten teams ranked higher than that on occasion, but they've never done it as a tournament caliber team because they've never been a tournament caliber team. Since it's the biggest game they've ever won as a tournament caliber team, and it basically is the signature win on their first ever tournament caliber profile, I think it's the biggest win they've ever had. It was a spectacular win. I think it was Wisconsin's first home loss. Is that right?
It was.
It was. Okay, thank you. What a great win and an exciting moment for Northwestern and their entire program. I mean, sincere congratulations to their team, their coaches, their fans. That was awesome. And pretty much now they just need to hold serve to get in. Wouldn't you agree, Chad? Well, everybody.
Well, let me throw it over, Matt. Let me throw this over to you. They did have a bad loss against Illinois earlier in the week, so it was a nice a huge bounce back. What do you think they need to do the rest of the way to lock up that tournament bid?
I think just probably 2 more wins. You have 4 home games to get that, and at not so great Illinois where you get some revenge, and at Reeling, Indiana. So, I mean, they have 6 games I think in all considered winnable. The only ones they might even have an underdog is the last game of the year against Purdue. So 5 chances, 5 real good chances, 1 decent one. You just need 2.
You mentioned Reeling Purdue and Reeling Indiana. Titel, Indiana had a pretty horrible week this week. I mean, the teams they lost to, Purdue and Michigan, are right there, but this team is just going the wrong direction. Is this the end of it for Indiana, now at 5-8 in conference?
I think it is. I need to include a quick note, though, about Northwestern.
Oh,
as amazing as it is to beat Wisconsin on the road, which it is, when you're doing it without your leading scorer, Scotty Lindsey, that just takes it up a notch. I can't give them enough credit. I really think they are in, not a lock, but near lock, which is something we've never said in a century of Northwestern basketball. As far as the Hoosiers, certainly trending downward. Granted, when you're playing top 30 teams like Wisconsin, Purdue, Michigan, you're going to lose. And they're losing mostly by single digits. Michigan was a double-digit game. Thank God they had that triple overtime win over Penn State. Otherwise, it would be 6 losses in a row. They got 5 left, and they still have to play Purdue and the aforementioned Northwestern. So I do not see this team winning 20 games this year, and I do not see this team making the tourney.
Yeah, 5 left, 4 out of the 5 on the road, too.
On the road, and the other one at home against Northwestern on senior night.
Iowa and Ohio State aren't going to be picnics either.
So on senior night, do they honor Tom Crean since it may be his final home game?
Joby, a team that had a very good week actually, besides Northwestern with that win, was Michigan, who we thought was reeling, and they go ahead and blow out Michigan State, and then get their first true road win of the year at Indiana.
Well, they swept Indiana now in an impressive fashion. Michigan right now has moved. The bubble sort of imploded a little bit this week, whereas played really good last week. I think it played poorly this week with a huge notable exception in Michigan. Michigan has now made their way out of even first four consideration for now. We'll see how they go going down the stretch. But they get helped by little small things, and the ratings pick it up. When I look at SMU, and we'll get to it in the American, but SMU's win, all of a sudden they're tied for the lead in the American, a solid team in the field. Hey, Michigan has a win there. And so Michigan's resume by their own actions and the actions of those that they've beaten and played, South Carolina is not a bad loss at South Carolina. That all of a sudden looks like a pretty solid tournament resume.
I am trying to pull up the ACC here. Here we go. We're going to move over to the ACC next. And Matt, let me start off with you here. We just saw, right before we came on the air tonight here, Louisville get by Syracuse, but they needed overtime to do so, as Syracuse again almost picked up their third top 10 win at home.
Yeah, they squeaked it out, but it's a huge one for Louisville, who I actually think might be the conference's best bet to get a 1 seed. And I think there is one open now with Baylor's surprising loss in Lubbock. So, yeah, Louisville, even though they got swept by Virginia, everything else is pretty strong. And I think those non-conference wins over Purdue and Kentucky, who, if not protected seeds, are pretty close.
Yeah, and David, here's that Louisville profile. Big comeback to get the home win over Miami over the weekend as well.
Yeah, not the best showing against Miami, but Virginia's just a bad matchup for them. I don't think they're ever going to really beat Virginia. As far as getting the 1 seed, I definitely think they have a path to it. The question is, are they good enough to – basically, I think they need to win out. And the one game that really is going to be hard to win, but it is the 1 seed caliber win, is at North Carolina. Let me ask you this, Matt. If Louisville does not go for the double, do you think they get it? Because I don't see them getting it without doing that.
I think if they won the regular season outright and even say 13-5, as long as they don't go like 1 and done in the ACC tourney, I think they could still get it, because I don't think this is Baylor's last loss either. So,
yeah.
Well, Stalika, the other team that had a very good week this week was Duke. First of all, beating arch rival North Carolina at home, and then following them up with squeaking out a win over Clemson, but getting the win. Do you think Duke is got a shot there at maybe not a 1, but a 2-line type of seed?
I mean, they're definitely up in protected seed territory, and I think they've probably nudged up their way to the 3-line. Although I would be remiss if I didn't go back to Syracuse, though, because in case you haven't heard over the weekend, one of their former star players in Fab Melo also passed away over the weekend. So Syracuse has already been playing with heavy hearts this year due to the passing of Pearl Washington. Now they're playing for Fab Melo as well. So definitely our thoughts and prayers to the Syracuse family right now.
Yeah, I have to echo that. There is that Duke profile, though, that we were just mentioning a second ago. And Joby, I guess the other team we do want to discuss is Virginia, and the ball that would not fall through the hoop.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, I mean, it bounces. Has anyone honestly ever seen that? I mean, someone said, yes, I've seen it. In my 8-year-old girls basketball game,
I saw it in a high school game once.
Yeah,
I think, and I saw it.
Joby and David, Lee Del Vecchio put this in the email thread. Alex Oriaki for UConn also did the same thing during a foul shot.
Foul shot, wow! But Virginia, this is the type of games that a protected seed, in all honesty, pulls out. Virginia's had a couple now in a row of games, the at Syracuse and at Virginia Tech. Neither is a bad loss unto its own. Neither loss is going to affect the berth into the tournament or even wearing white. But this is the sort of loss that Virginia cannot afford, because let's take a peek at that schedule coming up. Duke, North Carolina twice. and you think Pitt at home should be easy. Hell, Virginia lost yet and again another overtime game to Pitt. I mean, how many overtime games is Virginia going to lose this year?
Yeah, and losing 3 out of 5 is not the way to get a 1 or a 2 seed, Joby.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, the good news for Virginia is, let's say Virginia goes hypothetically 5-1 down the stretch. All of a sudden, they might be looking back at a 1 because they probably win the conference tournament at that point and have wins over protected seeds in Carolina and Duke and tournament teams in Miami.
Yeah, Virginia was my pick to win the league, and I thought they would get a 1. And they certainly needed to win both of those games to live up to my expectations.
A little bit.
So they have failed, Joey.
On the other side of the Virginia Tech game, a little bit of news that Chris Clark is out for the season. One of Virginia Tech's better players, maybe not their best, but one of their top players. But one more team I want to bring up, and Titel, last week in our bracket rundown show, you gave us a very good reason why Notre Dame was not as great of a team as the rest of us thought they were. In fact, you convinced everybody.
You did.
Turn around and beat Florida State, crush them over the weekend. Do you want to change your tune on them, or?
I mean, I'll give them credit for a great win by double digits at home against a top 4 seed kind of team. I think they're going to keep it rolling at BC and at NC State in the week ahead, which will put them at 21-7. A tough one. If there's a tough home game against Georgia Tech, if that's a thing, but then they play BC again, it's like the opposite of the Virginia schedule. This team could finish 7-0 in their last 7 to get the 24-7 and looking like a top 3 seed. That the season finale at Louisville is going to be ginormous, of course, but no, they deserve all the credit in the world for playing great against a great Florida State team.
All right, well, let's look over to the Big East right now, and Matt, you've got some Big East ties, so let me start with you. Your Marquette team had a not so good week.
No, that was the Butler loss. Even at home, you could live. Georgetown, not great losing them in the first place. Not competing in the second half of that game is really not good. And now all the goodwill built up after that created Villanova stretch has basically been spent. The slight good news is you have 3 more games against Xavier and Creighton, 2 at home to maybe build some of that back, and then rematch games against the Johnnies and the Friars. But we're just about back to square one here.
Yeah, I don't have the screen right there. I'll try to get that resolved. Titel, I believe you actually were at that Marquette Georgetown game, correct?
I was 10 rows behind the basket thanks to my friend Alicia, an adjunct faculty member who got some great Georgetown seats. It was amazing. It was a 3-headed monster of Pryor, Peak, and Govan combining for 63 points. Marquette as a team had 62. And Matt, as you're well aware, I believe I think Marquette is the best 3-point shooting team in the nation. Only made 3 of 14 against the Hoyas. I assume that it's a live by the 3, die by the 3 kind of game for them.
I think it was, I guess, a little bit of that. And by the way, your record at games Marquette attended isn't very good, John. So could I please ask you not to attend any more Marquette games?
They are 0-3 with me present this year. Not a coincidence.
I would just throw out there that Georgetown actually had a pretty scary incident with a motor, not with this game, but with the game before when they lost to Villanova. They their bus was in an accident, and I believe Trey Campbell actually missed that game. I don't know if he played in the Marquette game or not. Did he?
No, he did not.
Yeah, and he got injured there. The other driver was their bus driver hit an SUV. It was pretty ugly situation. John Thompson. JT was hobbling around the sidelines even. Joby, how about this Seton Hall team? Talk about a bad loss by a bubble team. You
can't lose to the Johnnies right now. This just is not the time to do it. It's not the time to do it. They almost lost to Providence, as you can see, and almost lost to Georgetown. They're not playing well. I mean, they really aren't. Let's get real here. The Hall right now might be on the – I probably still would push them in because I think the Big East overall is a good conference. But they are either first 4 or are sitting on the sidelines waiting. And the absolute tussle that is going to happen for those three Big East teams that are right on the bubble, them, the aforementioned Marquette, and Georgetown, is going to be tough. And you can look at the schedule ahead. These teams, who is going to survive at the end of the day? Well, none of them. Or will all of them? This week, Georgetown beats Creighton. Gotta like Georgetown's chances. The Hall beats Nova at home. You like the Hall. So this week, Seton Hall, this is your week. If you need to reset and go, you have your chances. Creighton and Nova. Let's see what she can do.
Talk about another team with a big week ahead here. Salika, your Xavier Musketeers at Providence, at Marquette. Providence has been a tough team to beat, especially on the road this year, as Butler found out this week. You really got to win these games, don't you?
It's going to be a different roster than what Xavier had when they destroyed Providence in the Big East opener. I mean, we've covered Sumner's injury, but if you didn't see the Villanova game, Trayvon Blewett had also aggravated an ankle injury he had sustained from an earlier game. So his play was very limited in the Villanova game. And I guess he's day-to-day as far as the upcoming Providence and Marquette games. I mean, these are winnable, but if Xavier drops both of these, then the profile starts to become a little more iffy because Xavier had, with the exception of the Colorado game, had only been losing to top 20-ish teams.
David, your official
Yes.
job is to remind me when I'm screwing things up and skipping things. We forgot to take a look at the weeks ahead in both the Big Ten and the ACC. Let me go ahead and throw the ACC back up and ask you, David. This week ahead, we've got a couple of huge games, especially involving Virginia.
Yeah, it is. And again, this is Virginia at North Carolina.
And Duke at home on Wednesday before that.
Yeah, I think that I think that they'll get Duke, and we've seen their ability to play really well on the road against top tier teams. In the game against Villanova, they didn't win it, but they were right in it. But no, Virginia's problem, I know Joby talked to him earlier, is they appear to be they appear to have comfortable leads and have things in control. And then 2 or 3 times this season, we've seen them lose control. But they need to get that fixed if they're going to be deep in the tournament. Another team that's a fringe bubble team, and this conference is full of them, Clemson going to Miami. Wake Forest, who we haven't talked a lot about, who's held serve all year but also not won a big game all year. Do they have it in them to pick up something this week? Probably not at Duke.
Right.
But
let me just quickly throw the Big Ten back up here again. And Tytel, this is the upcoming schedule in the Big Ten here off to the side. What are you looking at as far as the key game? Is it the one coming up on Sunday?
It's a big week for Wisconsin. They go to Ann Arbor on Thursday and host the Terps on Sunday. If they can get both of those wins, then I think they jump back into the top 4 seed conversation. But as we saw, they're reeling after the Northwestern loss. I think that exposed them. Ethan Happ and Bronson Koenig, I believe, combined for only like 11 or 12 points. These are veteran leaders that you need to step up in February in conference play when the games count.
Right. The other team, of course, is Northwestern. Again, huge game at home against Maryland coming up on Wednesday. I think that's going to be a real fun one coming up Wednesday night.
yeah.
And then they play some crappy team on Saturday. I don't know what's up with that. Salika, here's the Big 12 conference. We just pulled them up on the screen. And, of course, we just saw the huge upset with Texas Tech taking down Baylor 84-78 and storming the court afterwards. You back on Texas Tech as a tournament team again?
Well, they cashed in their chip tonight against Baylor, but if you saw the game over the weekend, they came very close to cashing in an upset against Kansas, but were unable to take advantage of Kansas missing critical free throws down the stretch until I think Jackson finally hit one in the closing seconds to give the Jayhawks the edge. So
Yeah, that was
assuming
an
they're able to
79 1-point win by the Jayhawks there.
I was going to say, assuming Kansas holds on to beat West Virginia tonight, this should give them a comfortable 2-game lead as far as the Big 12 standings go.
So, David, you have a comment on them?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that was another really exciting game. And had they got that one and this one, like, they went from outside the bubble to probably safely in just with those 2 wins. They're playing a lot better. And I realize that they are way better at home than they are on the road. But I mean, do they have it in them to play their way, not just onto the bubble, but safely in it the rest of the way? Great job by Chris Beard this year
Yeah.
in his first year at Texas
Let's
Tech.
go ahead and pull up the rest of that Texas Tech schedule here. In fact, Joby, here is their schedule after the Baylor win: at West Virginia, at Oklahoma State, at Kansas State. Their big problem is where are the road wins, and we have trouble finding them.
They're not there.
No, that I mean, they don't have them. It's one
At
of the reasons
Richmond.
why they're on the outside looking in.
Right.
Like, even with the big win tonight, this, you asked, is can you put them back in the end? No. They don't have the heft. They don't have it on the road. They got a nice win tonight, but they're kind of a meandering team that's below. They are a level below that Iowa State, Oklahoma State, TCU crowd, K-State even, that will determine whether that will be the cut line. You can see it because this is a pure round robin schedule, so conference record means a lot here. 5-8, you're behind these other teams, even with a really nice win over Baylor tonight.
And Matt, you're a big fan of these predictive. These predictive ratings here, the ones that are in green. And this West Virginia team, 2, 3, and 4, a 1-seed type. Actually had a real good week, going 2-0 this week. Win at Oklahoma, home win over Kansas State. Is this West Virginia team a team we should be talking about, especially with Baylor falling off of the one line?
Well, I'd say this much. They hold on to this result here. They are up 7.5 here at Fog Allen. They can pull that win off. I think they can vault pretty close because I don't think there's a lot right now separating where I have Baylor 4th. I at least had them going into tonight, and I had West Virginia 10th on my S-curve. There's not a whole lot separating those teams right now. So a win tonight, I think they might be pretty close to the one line.
Titel, do you agree with him?
Yeah, I mean, as a predictive guy, I mean, I like all the rankings because I like to factor anything, but it's hard to argue with top 4 across the line in green.
Yeah.
So, Matt, what you're saying is that you think winning at Fog Allen would be a big win for West Virginia. That is brilliant. I agree.
Well, I find it funny that, when you look at these rankings, you look at the resume rankings, Flakenberg, like My Nitty Gritty, the KPI, the Strength of Record, they're all in very much agreement. Likewise, the predictive are all in very much agreement, but they are, vastly different. I can say that if I know what's bringing West Virginia down in mine to a degree was one really bad loss, that you don't get at the top end, but a really great
bad
win
relative to the
Kansas.
Protective seeds.
You're going to see that 19. I can guarantee you're going to see that 19 go at least into the low teens. Just that's going to be just a huge win.
Well, David, here's the upcoming games in the Big 12. Huge one coming up on Saturday, of course. And besides that one, anything else you're looking forward to?
Let's see. Oklahoma State at TCU, again, a little bit bubblicious, although I think both teams are moving further and further inside. But yeah, that K-State Texas game that you're talking about Saturday. Whoo, boy.
Titel, do you have a prediction for us for Saturday's Kansas Baylor game? The real important game, not the one that David's watching.
Man, that's tough. I think that I'll go with the home team. I like Kansas coming back tonight. They were dead early. They were down 10 in like 3 minutes, the Mountaineers, but they slowly are building a comeback. I think they were tied at the half. Baylor got not embarrassed by a less than amazing Texas Tech team, but it certainly woke them up. It might have been a trap game, who knows, but I think that Coach Drew will have them back ready to rock on Saturday. So I'll go with Baylor.
Okay.
When in doubt, take a page from last week and just say pain.
Well, Titel, let me stick with you a second here, and not to go over the Mountain West. I always do that.
Nice upcoming games we got in the Mountain West.
Nothing coming up in the Mountain West. The Pac-12, last week while we were doing our bracket rundown, we had UCLA Oregon on, and we kind of ended that show saying, Oregon's got this. And things turned around quickly at the end there. Amazing win by UCLA, though.
It was. What blew me away is that I knew that the Bruins didn't have a deep bench. I thought the Ducks had a little bit more, but each team had 7 guys play 15-plus minutes. So it seems like these coaches are really starting to get into the very limited rotation. Amazing ball handling by the Ducks. Only 3 turnovers all night, which arguably says more about UCLA's lack of defense. And the other thing was Lonzo Ball. They talk about him as the possible number 1 overall draft pick and like the next Jason Kidd at point guard. He only had 1 assist, but he helped the team win with 15 points and 11 rebounds. I love seeing guys who, if part A, if your game is not working, you can rest on part B and part C. He's a winner. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, I think he could even go higher than that.
I just got to throw this out there. I believe he has 2 younger brothers, Lonzo Ball does, that have both already come into UCLA. One of them, LaMelo, who's a high school sophomore, scored 92 points in a game this week. The other one, LaAngelo, scored 72 points in the game earlier this year. So it's a heck of basketball talent in that family. But Joby, Oregon did bounce back with the win at USC after the UCLA loss. Is this Oregon team still right there on that 2-line, maybe 3-line?
Yeah, I didn't. I wasn't on the 2-line bandwagon when the committee released it this past weekend. But yeah, what's funny is John T and I actually disagree. I like Arizona more than Oregon, even though he's the Arizona guy. Oregon is a solid protected seed. They are exciting to watch. They can actually play a degree of defense, which I don't care what happened in the second half. UCLA still can't play like a defense. You got to prove it to me more than once. Oregon has the ability to win out, and the win at USC shows that ability because that's not a give me win. Oregon still can make a case all the way up the seed line, but they need to win out to do so.
Well, we mentioned the Arizona team. They are now in first place and a nice home win over Cal. Matt, what about this Cal team, though, that lost that game? They have just kind of like hanging around there, sitting here at 18-7 overall with these very mediocre ratings, but good enough to be maybe in tournament contention.
Yeah, they're definitely in contention. Probably would be in the field today, although might be out of chip to dated, but haven't done a lot of either good or bad. Like they haven't beat any of the top teams in the Pac-12 yet. And non-conference, they lost to Seton Hall, and I think what still might be a big bubble showdown.
Well, you say yet, they've only got 1 shot left. That's a home game against Oregon. So
I think they need that one. I think they can get that one. Oregon, while as good as they are, USC was by far their best home or their best road win of the year. And Cal kind of squeaked by them last year, as you may recall.
They'd also better be careful for their last week when they have to go to Utah and Colorado. Those are not going to be easy games because Utah has been kind of wavering. Colorado's finally playing a little bit better, even though they've been a punchline on the panel this year.
Right.
Oh,
Well,
Bill Walton made a case over the weekend as to why Colorado belongs in the NCAA tournament. So,
hey, Auburn does.
They're playing
But anyway,
Conference of Champions.
So many teams on the bubble seem to be falling backwards. Can Cal be the team that actually finishes strong and plays their way into it instead of backs into it? I'm hoping.
I honestly believe Cal doesn't have to beat Oregon. Like Cal just, if the rest of the bubble continues to do what they're doing, then I think Cal can just, you can't stumble in the Mountain West area. You're exactly right.
You certainly don't want to stumble in the Mountain West.
If they win 4 of the next 5, I think they're in because their ratings will be, they're going to be one of the last teams in, but you're not going to be able to kick them out compared to the other teams that they're going to be set up against, whether it's that middling SEC area, that middling Big East area, that lower half ACC area. Cal's probably going to get the call.
Right. And Cal, big test actually coming Friday night. This is their big rivalry game, and it's on the road at Stanford, so don't overlook that one if you're them.
They have to win all those games but Oregon, but
the other big game this weekend, of course, Saturday night. Actually, it's a Pac-12 network game of all things. It's USC and UCLA, though. Salika, Yeah, you want to give us a call on that one? You know, USC did beat them at home earlier this year.
USC has actually beaten them 4 times in a row if you count the 3-game sweep from last year. I mean, I've got to think UCLA is going to be fired up for this one, but it seems like they had quite the momentum turn after, of all things, their pyramid incident, just as we were finishing up our podcast from last week.
Yes, everybody's okay, so let's all laugh at them.
Let's move over to the SEC now. Actually, I was just trying to get my notes. It's a place where I can read them here. And Matt, over in the SEC, we did see Kentucky pick up the win over Alabama after Alabama knocked off South Carolina in a lot of overtimes.
Yeah, I think that was a big blow to Bama. I think Bama probably needed that to get seriously into the at-large consideration. Had they done that, that would have been a great week with the South Carolina-Kentucky wins, which is about as good a week as you can have in the SEC. But without that, Bama is probably on the road to a 4th seed in the NIT.
Well, I guess the question is, we see Florida, we see Kentucky, we see South Carolina up there. And Titel, is there a 4th team we should even be discussing in the SEC?
I mean, if you want to squeeze them in as a 13 seed maybe or something, but it's hard to give anybody some strong contention. I have not been driving the Arkansas bandwagon. That's a strong word. I've had them in my field week after week for most of the past 2 months. When you're losing to Missouri and Vandy and you're beating LSU by single digits, like, it says more, as Joby said, about the weakness of the bubble, but I'm having a hard time keeping them in here.
Well, David, you know I got to do this to you.
Yes.
You posted a bracket today, and
I did.
you put in
And it was brilliant.
down here in 8th place. You think that Auburn is a tournament team. Now, I personally think that you're smoking something as well as drinking.
Well, yeah,
something.
but that's got nothing to do with the pick.
Go ahead. Go ahead and tell me on why Auburn is a tournament team.
Well, considering when you consider everybody else that is just categorically sucking, you already covered Arkansas and their horrible losses and lack of good wins. Marquette, while they have some good wins, their RPI is somewhere around 1 million. Indiana's is somewhere around 1.5 million. Clemson is about 17 games out of first, and Florida State is Pittsburgh is even further back than that. So here's an Auburn team that, while they have one really bad loss, they do have a win at TCU. And TCU, while not that strong, has been very good at home this year.
I also noticed as it relates
a team that's held serve and that's at least done something. I don't like the pick, but at the same time, I don't want to take someone that's falling backwards.
Auburn is not only losing parties to Ole Miss, they were swept in both basketball games by Ole Miss as well. That's not good, Puppet.
Well, there are a few warts on. I mean, it isn't the best.
And then there's 2 letters B and C that also are going to be scarlet letters.
Well, that was just a crazy fit. Yeah, I mean, I wish I wasn't picking them, but I had no choice. The bubble is that bad.
Joby, here's the upcoming games in the SEC this week. Interesting week for.
And then there's Auburn hosting Florida. They get that one.
You heard a little. The game will we see tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, it's not the Florida-Auburn game. Though that would be a game that all of a sudden I maybe have to start looking at Auburn, probably not in the bubble, but at least be in the top half of the NIT. Can Tennessee pull off? I believe that number 4 team is Tennessee, but they've got to. Can't lose on Saturday, Missouri, but they may need to beat Kentucky. Can they? They might be one of the only teams outside the top 3 who can. If they do, it's going to be tough to keep the Vols out unless they do stub their toe on Saturday at home against Missouri.
Right.
Tennessee is 13-11 against Div 1. I think they're 1 win away.
The other game, the MAC, coming up on Saturday, Kentucky, who needed overtime to beat Georgia at home, now has to go on the road. Could the Wildcats have another trap game here?
Would that surprise me at all if they lost it? And man, I still would not be totally stunned if Georgia makes a late run here to maybe at least get in contention. Of course, I thought that about Vandy last Saturday, and then they lost by 20 to Missouri.
Yeah. So let's go. Let's take a quick look over the West Coast Conference. In fact, and Titel, let me bring you back here. We had the game of the season. We thought it was going to be the game of the season in the WCC. I personally thought St. Mary's played really well the entire game, and was still down the entire game and never really made a run at it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give myself some credit for picking Gonzaga to win because I think a lot of the panel picked St. Mary's last week, so go me.
I didn't.
It was nice. It wasn't just Nigel Williams-Goss going off for 40 points or something. The Zags had 4 guys in double figures. The Gales only had 1, Jacques Landale. And in what can only be described as a Marquette three-point shooting performance, the Gales only made 4 of 15 from behind the arc. You're not going to beat anybody, much less the Zags, when you're shooting that poorly.
And
I was big on Gonzaga.
Titel
and I. The rest of you doubted. We were right.
Where do we mute that part? Salika, do we have a potential trap game coming up for St. Mary's on Saturday here at BYU? This is, other than the Gonzaga games, their toughest game on the entire West Coast Conference schedule. BYU not great, but has been competitive this year at least.
Well, the schedule makers were a little bit kinder towards St. Mary's because they at least threw them a bone and scheduled a home game against LMU before they go to BYU. I mean, that's a game that St. Mary's should still win, but if they stumble against that game for whatever reason, then we have to start wondering if the Gales are going to be at least a first ballot team and possibly on the trajectory they were last year, even though they won the West Coast last year, actually ended up missing the tournament because they lost the championship game to Gonzaga.
Well, Joby, I mean, do the Gales really need this win at BYU then?
No, I don't think so. I think this is. I think their resume is a little stronger. They did a little bit more out of conference. Yeah. The loss to UTA isn't great, but it's actually not awful. The Gales, I think, are in a solid spot, especially when we've already talked about the bubble component. I think you're going to be at the end of the day. Look at their metrics. Everybody agrees on the metrics for St. Mary's. And I think that is where they are, in that either 19, 17 to as high as 28. A loss to BYU is going to push those metrics up 5 spots probably. That's well within the metrics of where the at-large line is. The at-large line this year is going to be probably right around 45 for our audience. Because there's 36 at-larges and 9 conference champs from that will be from conferences that would otherwise be at-large winner people. So they've got room. BYU will you shouldn't lose that game, but they'll lose some rope, but they won't push them all the way out.
Well,
or even to the bubble, I would dare say.
Matt, we also saw was probably the game of the year in terms of the schedule in the American, where Cincinnati went to SMU and lost on Sunday. Did you take anything out of that game as far as either one of those teams?
Yeah, I certainly did think SMU was an 8 seed like a certain puppet thought, but I thought that looked like a really good top 25 level team that I think should be no lower than a 6 in the bracket.
Well, Titel, do you agree with him? Has SMU proven to you now that they are a 5-6 seed type of team?
I don't know about 5. That seems a bit high.
Okay.
I think that 6 is legit. I mean, we're talking like St. Mary's, Notre Dame territory, and I think I could see St. Mary's dropping, even though, as I said last week, a loss to Gonzaga by 10 points is arguably a win. The Irish, as we saw, had a great win against Florida State. I don't love SMU's non-conference play, frankly. Like, TCU is a good win. Pitt and Stanford, not so much. I think 7's good for now, maybe 6. I think 5's a bit high.
I'm hesitant because they beat TCU at home, and TCU's just 2-5 on the road. So TCU in a vacuum is good, but you have to look at where the game was played too.
Yeah, TCU, which was just your case for Auburn.
Auburn won at TCU. That's completely different.
David, I have to do this for our colleague Lee Del Vecchio. The UConn Huskies, who we completely wrote off after they lost their first game of the season to Wagner, have suddenly put together 5 out of 6 wins as we move in closer and closer to the conference tournament that they are going to be hosting.
Yes, and one of those 5 was actually against the RPI Top 230. Very impressive run we got going here for UConn.
Obviously there's no way they can sniff the at-large. I'm seriously asking this question. Matt, let me ask this to you. Do you think UConn could be a factor in the American tournament?
No, I'm telling you, I would be stunned if this is not a Cincy SMU final. Those 2 teams are miles beyond the rest of that league.
Okay.
Have you seen Cincinnati's upcoming schedule this week? This is one of Mick Cronin's favorite games coming up on Wednesday. It's at South Florida.
Hey,
please explain that joke.
I think it came after, when they won at South Florida last year, and what can only be classified as a classic Big East rock fight. He was complaining to the media about how tough a team like South Florida can be.
Hey, we do got to give props to South Florida. They did get their first win in the American, leaving Oregon State as the only power conference team without a conference win, and I don't think they're going to get one. One more conference we want to hit, though, and over in the Atlantic 10, and David, VCU, we talked to them last week. Have they found a way to win a game with 0.4 seconds left? And the very next game at GW, they did it again.
It was amazing. It was St. Bonaventure was the technical foul on, I guess, the security guard for walking off with the ball. In this game, they ended up drawing a charge, they ended up drawing a blocking foul after what, again, appeared to be a game-winning 3-point shot from the corner with 0.4 seconds to go. VCU has been down 2 consecutive games by a point with 0.4 seconds to go and won both of them.
Yeah. This was a high school level play. Just awful by GW. High school level play where you try to draw the blocking foul on the inbounds play by running, by having the inbounder run along the baseline. Tytel, you're in the GW area there. How poor of a coaching was that by GW on that play?
That's a tough call as to where to assign the blame. Colin Goss ran over Daquan Lewis. I've seen the replay of the highlight many times, and I think it was a good call by the ref. He just dump trucked him, ran right over him, didn't even look. As a coach, I'd like to think that you go through the last second play and where to position your team and stuff, but if you're not looking for that and the big guy's just running, I think they put in Goss as a 6'11" guy specifically to block the inbounds pass. He might never have turned left or right in his life when he's doing that because he doesn't think that there's going to be a guy standing there to try to get run over. So I don't know how much coaching comes into it, frankly.
I just think it was it's one of those plays that I think high school, maybe even junior high school, might be able to pull off. It shouldn't be pulled off at this type of level.
We were watching the game, and what was funny was we were on a call. Was it under the radar or what were we? I don't know what it was.
It was under the radar.
Okay. And the game, they inbound the ball, game over, at least so we thought. I didn't even see the foul in live action because the camera followed the ball. We didn't know what was going on. And we were just beside ourselves. We were just like, oh, my God, it happened again. It was great to watch.
Joby, the other big win this week, the other notable game this week, Dayton picked up the huge road win at Rhode Island. Does that lock Dayton up now?
Huge. Come on. I know Matt's big roadie guy, but I'm not sold on Rhode Island this year. Yeah, it's anything more than an NIT team. Yeah, it's a good win. Nothing. These two. This is what I'll say. Right now, sure, if Dayton wins out and they lose in the conference tourney at some point they're in. But if Dayton stumbles one more time, hypothetically, and VCU stumbles one more time, hypothetically, both very realistic components, then I don't think we could have a bid thief if a Rhode Island or Richmond won the conference tournament, because I think it would be knocking VCU or Dayton out. I think they're still very much at risk. Dayton is certainly in, and there's no question right now, but they should not be breathing easy because they don't have the strength of the resume overall, especially out of conference, to be able to say, Oh yeah. We're in. We're in. With a loss or two. Be careful there, Dayton.
Well,
I think they both look like tournament teams, especially when you factor in how good VCU has looked in the last half second of the games this year.
Stalika, you had a comment about them?
I'll actually have a couple different comments here. Number one, we had mentioned the Georgetown bus trip. That isn't going to be able to top what happened at St. Bonaventure after their game against St. Louis.
This is amazing.
Apparently their bus driver actually stole the bus like just after the game had ended and was spotted about 50 miles away from the Riley Center. I mean, it took a couple hours, but someone was able to track the bus down and bring it back to Olean, so at least the St. Louis team could bus to the airport and fly back to St. Louis.
And she was drunk. She blew a .22 when they found her. She probably went out to have a few and forgot how to get back to the arena.
It was a bus that was provided by St. Bonaventure, by the way, so it was one of their drivers.
And
awesome.
Segues to my second point right here. We have the big one coming up tomorrow night for our friends at the Blackburn Review. It's Arch Baron Cup Part 2 between Dayton and St. Louis.
Matt, let me go to you. I think you had a comment on this conference too.
Well, I was to say, I have been basically dogging VCU all year, not thinking they're a tournament team. Well, you have at Richmond, at Rhode Island, at Dayton, the three other teams in the conference basically with a pulse. You win those games, you're a tournament team.
Yep.
You lose a couple, then, we're going to be seeing you in the 2 seed of the NIT.
Yeah, and that's the big game this week, I think, is Friday night's VCU at Richmond game. But
that should be fun.
On that note, let me go ahead and pull this screen down here. And let me run through each of you. Joby, let me start with you. Any other thoughts on what we've seen this past week, or any other final thoughts for the evening?
No, the one I'll have is I'll harken back to our Northwestern conversation. It is such a, Chris Collins, deserves a lot of credit here. Is he the heir apparent? Wojo's done a pretty good job, at Marquette. Who does, the K tree doing it? But we skipped over one thing. It's still Northwestern. They play Rutgers. Uh-oh.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take any win as a Rutgers guy.
A loss to Rutgers puts them right back in oh, no, Northwestern, no. Yeah, yes, they just have to go 500, but that 500 cannot include a loss to Rutgers.
Salika.
Yeah, I'm also going to add another note as it relates to the Northwestern game. I mean, if you saw at the end of the game, Northwestern would have had a kind of an exclamation point dunk. And for some reason, I guess some of the Wisconsin coaches didn't take too kindly to that. I mean, if this were a baseball game and it were May and June, you probably would have had the dugouts emptying, crying about violating the sacred code or whatever. It just seems ridiculous.
Biggest win in school history and over a better team. I had no problem with it, honestly. And let me, Tytel, let me turn to you.
I think we'd be remiss not to talk about the UConn women's team as they're going for number 100 as we speak, currently up by 3 late in the third quarter, so I hope I don't jinx them. But I want to give a little shout out to some other notable streaks. Now that we're entering triple-digit territory, we have to go outside basketball because nothing has happened like this. Number 5, the Penn State women's volleyball team won 109 matches in a row that ended in 2010. Number 4, the BYU Hawaii women's tennis team, 130 straight matches that ended in 05. The Miami men's tennis team, 137 straight wins that ended in 64. The Yale men's swimming team at a 201 meet winning streak that ended in 61. And of course, the Trinity College men's squash team, a 252 match streak that ended in 2012. We are in uncharted waters.
We're not in squash waters yet, obviously. Matt, let me turn to you.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier today, I think the committee, our committee, the real committee, whatever, I think has gotten a little too reliant on just formulating a field based on solely wins and losses over big wins or bad losses. Yes, I think they need to be a big component. I think they need to use the metrics. This helps where a team like SMU, not the greatest on paper, but anyone who's seen them play or whatever, that is a top 25 team, top 20 team. And I just can't see that team being an 8 seed. And I think we've seen it too much before. And look at Wichita last year. They were not an 11 seed and come 2 wins and a narrow loss to a good Miami team later. I think people realize, wait a minute, this was not the 41st to 44th best team.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Matt, we didn't discuss when we were discussing what the committee released over the weekend, but I did not see the reliance on these predictive metrics that we thought we might see after they brought in these guys like Ken Palm to brief them on the metrics. David, let me turn to you.
I would just like to reiterate my feeling on quarters here. I mean, this is just. I don't understand why we need a clock to tell us how much time is left until the half is half over. We don't need quarters. It's just an unnecessary thing to stop. And I will not stand by and let the NCAA Rules Committee do this to James Naismith.
Oh, okay. No, you definitely have to do something about that. But just one other note here. We did have, at least heading into play tonight, we had three remaining teams that were undefeated in conference play. Those were the Zags, of course, who were undefeated overall, as well as Vermont and Princeton. You didn't want to hear that part, Titel, I know. But three teams without a win heading into play tonight as well. North Carolina A&T, SIU Edwardsville, and Oregon State. So we're down to only 6 teams that are either winless or undefeated. We may be losing a few more of those as we go ahead here, though probably not Oregon State at any point. But on that note, on behalf of, we've got David Griggs and John's over there. I think it's John Sleek over there is David Griggs. Down below me is John Titel, Matt Zakowski, and Joby Fortson. I'm Chad Sherwood. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we're going to talk to you again real soon.